They didn't at all. Bob Ryan from the Boston Globe joining us. Let's talk the NBA All-Star Fast. Bob Ryan, our old mate from the Boston Globe, a very well-respected man in American sporting media circles, also a guest, of course, on Around the Horn on ESPN here in New Zealand. Bob, thank you so much for your tweets yesterday where you absolutely took it to the All-Star game, describing it as a disgraceful farce and saying these NBA stars are showing no respect for the game. Almost 400 points scored. I don't know how more ludicrous or ridiculous a supposed game of sport could get.
Let me give you a number that even further identifies these players as athletic criminals, and that is 3. That is the number of personal fouls in the game. 3. There were 5 free throws attempted based on 3 personal fouls, which means that no one made any semblance of pretense of guarding anyone at any point in the game.
So what is the answer here now? Is it the players are just not interested in playing this? Are they so paranoid about being injured that, of course, they don't want any physical contact? Or is this a statement from them that says, hey, unless you're prepared to pay us even more money, we're really just going to turn this into a joke?
Well, I don't have the definitive answer at all. I don't, and in that regard, I don't think it's the injury thing. I don't think that. I don't think it's their concept, I guess. The modern player, this crop, the concept of what the All-Star games can and should be, and we are in such a three-point mania era. And so there was an extraordinary number of three-point shots taken, and some layups, which were basically uncontested layups on fast breaks, and minimal amount of what we call mid-range jump shots. Anyway, they aren't interested in playing a real game, and you would think that they would have a sense of personal pride, as previous generations of basketball players, going back to the first All-Star game in 1951, had always demonstrated, and that is we're playing against the best players in the world. We want to compete and just for personal pride. I don't care if it's for a dime, let alone however much money. But they don't seem to have that. And here's the thing that is very, very disturbing now. And this is really serious now. Forget about my rants and raves and all that. They were in an atmosphere yesterday during the day in which the commissioner of the league, Adam Silver, was urging them to be competitive, to put on a real basketball game, and no less than a figure than Larry Bird, who of course was there beaming with Indiana pride, having grown up in the state of Indiana and having been the coach and the general manager of the Indiana Pacers. He specifically said he really was hoping for a good game, a real game, and called upon the players to put on a good basketball game. And basically, they laughed at the world, at him, at Silver, at you, at me, at anybody who cares about the dignity of the game, by putting on that disgraceful performance last night.
People paying money for this. Do you think the spectators? Is the audience now so 30-second attention span that all they care about is a glory dunk and sort of some behind the back Harlem Globetrotter stuff? Or do you think the people that paid their money wanted to see competitiveness?
Well, I mean, we can't speak for each and every patron, but I do think there's an age gap. I think it's pretty clear that the younger generation is relatively okay with this because they got to see the game that they have grown up with now. The three-point shot has been in professional basketball it goes back to a minor league called the Eastern League in 1961, or the American Basketball League, and then in 1966, the ABA, American Basketball Association, came into being with the three-point shot, and it was introduced into the NBA in 1979. So do the math on that. That's 45 years ago. So you would have to, a whole lot of people have grown up knowing this aspect of the game, and it's taken on more and more prominence. So I think that you can draw a line at age 40 or 45 or whatever. It's pretty much certain that over that age, people are disdainful of what we saw last night, and under, they might actually be okay with it. but I don't know the exact numbers, but I do think somewhere in there is an age gap.
Bob Ryan is with us from the Boston Globe. I've read a lot, scouring websites today. It just seems that every commentator, every punter, every pundit is sharing the same overall disappointment, some more scathing than others. And if Adam Silver himself, begs the players to actually show some pride and show some respect, and they don't do that, what is it actually saying now? The player power has got to the stage where he had to bring in rules and regulations to stop them resting all the time because they don't want to play 82 regular season games because they all want to be playing in their 40s and still earning hundreds of millions of dollars. They brought in this league tournament in Vegas, of course, to raise more money. They're talking about taking the league over to China, to everywhere else that they go. Is that where it's going, or do you think the handbrake can be pulled up and it can be brought back to, hey, listen, you're actually athletes, you're actually meant to be competing is what you're meant to be doing, and you're meant to be doing it on a daily basis?
Well, let's see if there's any reaction on their part to the rather large backlash that is going on here in the States. Because, as you pointed out, I am hardly alone in condemning what we saw last night. And maybe they'll be awakened by it and stung by it and say, okay, maybe we're wrong, and maybe they'll see it better. We'll see what happens. We may have to wait a year now to find out how they feel about it. Actually, it's frustrating to me. To me, it shouldn't even be a conversation. It should be such a given that there should be an enormous amount of pride. I mean, can you imagine the likes of Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan of all? I mean, as fierce a competitor as the game has ever known. Allen Iverson, who was a tough-minded young player. I can go on naming names, and Charles Barkley, on and on, and Bill Russell, God knows. So why this generation doesn't share that sense of pride and respect for the game, and get a joy out of competing at the highest level in this regard? I don't know. I remember. I mean, I have covered some really, really good All-Star games in the 70s and 80s and the early 90s. It's possible, and interesting that some of the reaction that I've gotten via email and Twitter, or X as I say, is that it's not, all All-Star games are terrible. No, they weren't always terrible. They were some very good ones. Overtime games competitive. So, and you imagine what the skill level is enormous if they if they applied their defensive ability to the game and played a full basketball game, we would possibly have a sensational game. But they don't seem to care about producing that, and I do not understand why.
Well, Bob, as I say, does it go back to the fact that they actually care a lot less? I mean, when you watch the NBA at the moment, and I look at all of these games, there's a patch 3 or 4 weeks ago where 5 or 6 players all got 70 points, and I was watching it, and it just looked like a shoot-around. There's no defence at all. Maybe the rules have changed, and maybe it's because you're not allowed to contact anyone anymore. But is this just something that has just slipped? It's insipid. It's just slipped into the game where, these players, that's what they want. I mean, it's not about playing defense anymore. It's about posterizing. It's about having a meme. It's about having an Instagram. and people in my and your generation, look, we see this all over some of the sports that we love. We have this thing called cricket down in our part of the world. Test cricket, 5 days. It just exhausts you mentally, physically, emotionally. But now it's been turned into a T20. It's a 20 overs a side thing where it's just baseball. You just hit it to the fence, and the whole art of bowling has sort of been lost. It's like a home run derby. If you loved your baseball and every baseball game you went to was a home run derby and no pitching duels, you'd get pretty bloody sick of it, wouldn't you? But this is what, it's, mate, we're two men howling at the moon. That's what I fear here, Bob.
It's funny, as you were speaking, and it's very interesting. I didn't realize that there was the issue in cricket. The Broadway show of many years ago, Bye Bye Birdie, and there's a song that goes in Bye Bye Birdie, sung by Paul Lynde originally, and it's called "Kids, What's the Matter with Kids Today? Kids, who can believe?" And maybe it just comes down to that. This is just an obstinate generation. What's the matter with kids? And of course, the line goes on, why can't they be like we were, perfect in every way? Yeah. Well, and I'm, maybe it's as simple as that. I do say that there was a couple of elder statesmen who were involved in that game, namely LeBron James in his 20th All-Star game, Kevin Durant, who's 34 6 or so. So he's been around a long time. And you think if they could maybe have if they cared, if they were in tune to what you and I are saying, if they could have exerted some influence on it, but obviously they didn't. And then I asked about the coaches. The coaches obviously had no control. You cannot tell me that Doc Rivers and Chad Finch, the respective coaches, enjoyed presiding over that nonsense, that masquerade of basketball. I can't believe that. I think they obviously had no control over these players, embarrassing the game of basketball by running, by what we saw last night.
Devlin.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
The platform.